Welcome back to Unit 6. Today we're going to be talking about solving and graphing one-step inequalities using multiplication and division. Let's go ahead and get started with that right now. When solving inequalities using multiplication and division, we have a special rule for doing that. First, remember we're always going to isolate the variable using inverse operations. That doesn't change when we're solving equations. It's true here as well. However, if you multiply or divide both sides of an inequality by a negative number, you must flip the inequality sign. And we're going to see what that looks like. So if it was less than and you multiply or divide by a negative, then it'll be greater than, and vice versa. If it was greater than and you multiply or divide by a negative, then it will be less than. So with that in mind, let's go take a look at a refresher on how to graph inequalities. So a reminder on graphing inequalities, remember we're going to draw and label a number line to start. Then we're going to place an open or closed circle on our number line depending on whether we have greater than or equal to or just greater than and less than. So remember, when we have greater than or less than or equal to, we're going to have closed dot. When we have greater than or just less than, then we're going to have an open dot. Then we're going to draw an arrow to the right if the x is greater than, and we're going to draw an arrow to the left if the x is less than. Remember, it doesn't matter which side the x is on. We're always going to read the equation, or the inequality in this case, from the x. So x is less than or x is greater than. It doesn't matter if it's right on the left, we're going to read it from the x. So let's go ahead and take a look at example A. So here in example A, it says solve and graph the solution to the inequality. And it gives us a little hint. It says, do you need to switch the inequality symbol? So let's take a look. Before we do anything, we see that we've got a -3 next to that x. So we know in order to get rid of that -3, we're going to have to divide both sides by -3 because that's the inverse. So if we know automatically that we're going to be dividing by a negative, then we know that we are going to be flipping that sign. So yes, we are going to need to switch that inequality symbol for sure. So now let's go about and solve our inequality using inverse operations. So I'm going to start by drawing a wall down from our inequality symbol. Then as we just talked about the inverse operation, so the inverse of -3 times x, we're going to divide both sides by -3. -3 divided by -3 is going to give me a +1 or a +1x. Now as we talked about, we need to flip that inequality symbol because we divided by a negative, so I'm going to take my inequality symbol and I'm going to flip it. 21 divided by -3 is going to give me -7. So I have, again, reading from my inequality sign, or from my x is greater than -7. So let's make our graph down here. We're going to put a -7 right down there in the middle. And do I need an open dot or a closed dot? Since it's not greater than or equal to, it's going to be an open dot. And then we need to figure out, is it going greater than or less than? In this case, it is greater than. That means my arrow goes to the right where the greater numbers would be. And that is example A. Now let's take a look at example B. Here we are at example B, and it's to solve and graph the solution to our inequality. We've got -2 is less than or equal to x divided by 3. So again, it asks us, do we need to switch our inequality symbol? So let's take a look. I've got x divided by +3. So since I have a positive number, I'm not going to be switching my sign this time. So I'm going to be saying no to that. I do not need to switch my inequality symbol. But wait, it seems that I have a -2 there. So if I have a -2, my answer is probably going to be multiplying into a negative, but it doesn't matter what it multiplies into. It only matters what you're multiplying or dividing by. So let's take a look at the example now. We're going to draw a wall down from our equal sign. Now I've got x divided by 3. So the opposite of divides by 3 is to multiply. So we're going to multiply by 3 on both sides of our equation, or inequality. 3 and 3 are going to cancel each other out to give us x. Then I'm going to bring down my sign. Again, I'm not going to be flipping the symbol, as we talked about. And then 3 times -2 is going to give me -6. Remember, a positive times a negative is a negative. If you're not sure about your integer rules, make sure that you're using your calculator. So now that I've got this complete, I'm going to go ahead and draw my graph. So now I need to figure out my answer is going to be -6, but am I going to have an open dot or a closed dot? Since I'm talking about greater than or equal to, I'm going to have a closed dot, so I want to make sure that my dot is shaded in. And then since it's greater than, even though the x is on the right-hand side, I read from the x. It says x is greater than or equal to, so the numbers that are greater than or equal to are to the right, so that is where I'm going to draw my arrow, and I've completed this problem. Now let's take a look at example C. Here we are at example C, and it says solve and graph the solution to this inequality. So again, I'm going to take a look. Before I even start, I've got -4/5 times y. So I know I've got a negative times y, so the only way to get rid of that is divide by a negative. So I know I'm going to be dividing by a negative before I even begin, so I know I'm going to be switching my inequality symbol. So I can answer yes to that question there on the right. Yes, I know I'm going to be switching my inequality symbol before I begin. So now that I know that piece of information, let's go ahead and do that by drawing my wall down by my inequality sign to start. Now I've got a fraction, so I need to do the inverse of a fraction. So the inverse of a fraction is a reciprocal. I've got -4/5, so that reciprocal is going to be -5/4. And I'm going to do that to both sides of my inequality. Don't forget the negative sign on both sides. -5/4 and -4/5 are going to cancel out and leave me with 1 y. Don't forget to bring down our inequality symbol, but remember we're flipping it, so we're going to be having it face the other direction. Now I've got -8 times -5/4, or -8/1. Remember, I can do this two ways. I can use my calculator, so I could take -5 divided by 4 in my calculator times -8, and that will give me the right answer. However, if I don't want to use my calculator, I want to multiply fractions, I'm going to do that now. So I'm going to simplify my fractions first through cross simplification. 4 goes into 4 one time. 4 goes into -8 2 times, so -2 times -5 now is going to give me +10. Negative times a negative is a positive. 10/1, because 1 times 1 is 1, or we can just say that as 10. So y is less than 10. So now we're going to go ahead and graph it. So we're going to bring down our 10. Now we need to figure out if we're going to have an open dot or a closed dot. I see just less than there, no bar underneath, so I know it's going to be an open dot. And then I have to read it. Y is less than 10, so the numbers that are less than 10 are going to be on my left, so that's where I'm going to draw my arrow, and that completes the problem. Now let's have you try a few on your own. Here we are, practice problems numbers 1, 2, and 3. I want you to try these all on your own. You're going to pause the video, do the best that you can, complete all 3 of them. Press play again to see if you are right. How did you do? Were you able to get the same answers that I got? Hopefully you did. Notice the only one that you had to flip the sign on was number 3, because that was the only one that had a negative in it that you were going to be multiplying or dividing by. If your answers do match mine, great. If not, go ahead and fix your paper so it looks like mine, and then let's move on to the next one. So here we are at practice number 4. In this one, you're going to be matching the inequality to the graph of the solution set. So you're going to solve each of these inequalities, and then you're going to figure out which graph goes to which problem. They're labeled A, B, C, D, so you're going to label your answers A, B, C, D. Each one only has one right answer. So if you get A for more than one of them, you know that's not correct. So go ahead and pause the video now, do the best that you can, and then press play again to see if you are right. How did you do? Did you get all the answers that I got? Hopefully you did. If not, go back and check your work, see where you may have made your mistake, and then fix your work. And if you have them all correct, great. And then let's move on to the next example. Here we are at example D, and it says, which values of x make the following true? And I've got -x is less than -8. So let's go ahead and solve our inequality first. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my wall down for my inequality symbol. X is not by itself. It has that negative sign in front of it. So anytime I see a negative sign in front of a variable without any number there, I know that stands for 1, or -1 in this case, because we have a negative symbol. So we want to get rid of that -1. So the opposite of times -1 is going to be divide by -1. So we're going to divide both sides by -1. -1 divided by -1 is going to be +1, or +1x in this case. Now, since I multiplied or divide by a negative, that means I have to flip my sign. So in this case, I'm going to take my less than and flip it, make it a greater than. -8 divided by a -1, negative divided by a negative is a positive, so in this case, it's going to be +8. So now my answer is x is greater than 8, but that's not what it asked me to do. It says I need to figure out which values make the following in the inequality true. So I've got all those values down there at the bottom, and I have to circle the ones that make it true. So now I'm going to start at the left and read to the right and see which ones make it true. So is -12 greater than 8? No. Is -10 greater than 8? No. Is -8 greater than 8? No. Is 0 greater than 8? No. Is 2 greater than 8? No. This is awfully upsetting. Is 8 greater than 8? Well, I got 8, and I think that might be the right answer. However, 8 is not greater than 8. 8 is equal to 8, but it's not greater than 8. So this statement is not true because 8 is not greater than 8. Is 11 greater than 8? Yes, it is. Is 16 greater than 8? Yes, it is. So those two are the only correct answers here. Because again, remember, 8 is not greater than 8, so it doesn't make it true. We're not just looking for one answer. Inequalities always have many answers. In this case, it had 2 of the available answers, but it could have been a lot more. Now let's have you try one like this on your own. Here we are at practice number 5. It says, which values of x make the following inequality true? So you're going to try this one on your own and then select from the inequalities down at the bottom to tell me which ones are true. So I want you to go ahead and pause the video now, do the best that you can, then press play again to see if you are right. How did you do? Did you get all the same answers that I got? Hopefully you did. Notice you didn't have to flip your inequality symbol here because you divided by a positive number. You got x is greater than -2, so you were looking for all the answers that are greater than -2. So -2 is not greater than -2, so it was not one of the ones you could have selected. If you got the answers that I got, hopefully you did. Great. If not, fix your paper so it looks like mine, and let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Here we are at example E, and example E says write an inequality to represent each scenario. So this time we're not going to be solving inequalities, we're going to be writing inequalities to help us figure out what each scenario is looking for. So our first one says Bella earns $5 per hour for helping her grandmother with yard work. How many hours will it take for Bella to earn at least $20? So we've got some important things in there. We've got $5 per hour. Anytime we see per, we know we're going to be multiplying. And how many hours will it take her to earn at least $20? So those are important pieces of information. So we need to know whatever amount of money that she's going to be making is going to be at least $20. So it has to be equal to $20 or it could be more than $20. It can't be less than $20. So no matter what we end up with, we know that her amount is going to be greater than or equal to the $20 that she can make. So she's got to have whatever number that is going to be. We know it's going to be greater than or equal to 20. Now, it says that she earns $5 per hour. We don't know how many hours she works. So we know if we had 5 times 1 or 5 times 2 or 5 times 3, we don't know what that is, but we know we're going to be multiplying. So we're going to put that as 5h, h for hours. I could have used x, I could have used a, I could use any variable that I wanted. But this shows that I have 5 times the number of hours, and I want that to be greater than or equal to $20. Okay, so the at least is the key there because I need to make sure that I have on my side, or on her side in this case, more than the $20. Now let's take a look here at George. Now it says George is going to share Skittles with 6 of his friends. So he's going to be sharing the Skittles. And it was 6 of his friends. Important information. If George wants to give each friend at least 9 Skittles, how many does he need? Okay, so we went through and got our important information. We know that we're going to be sharing out these Skittles, so we're going to be dividing them up amongst his friends, so we know that we're going to have the division, and there has to be at least a certain amount, so we know that he has to have more than that amount once he's done dividing. So he needs to have at least in this case, so whatever we want to end up with wants to be bigger than 9 Skittles. So whatever we have, we need to make sure that it's greater than 9 when we're all said and done. So he's going to be dividing this number by 6. We don't know what that number is, so in this case I'm going to use x. And since we're going to be dividing it among 6 friends, we're going to have x divided by 6. So we don't know how many Skittles there are. That's going to be x divided by the 6 friends. And we know that that number has to be greater than or equal to 9 because he wants to have everybody have at least 9 Skittles. Now let's take a look here at Zachary. It says Zachary reads triple the number of books. So triple is going to be an important piece of information that his brother read over the summer. Zachary reads at most 90 books. So how many books did his brother read? So again, we've got our important piece of information that it's at most. So since we're going to have at most that number of books, we want to make sure that we can't read more than that. So if we have at most, we can't go over that amount of books in this case. So we're going to have less than or equal to 90 because we can't go over that 90 book amount because it's at most. Since we have triple, we know that that's going to be multiplying, and that means we're going to be multiplying by 3. So in this case, I'm going to write 3b, B for books. You could have used any variable that you wanted, but since we can read at most 90 books, then we're going to have our answer to be less than that. Now let's have you try some of these on your own. Here we are at practice number 6, where you're going to be writing inequalities to represent each of these scenarios. So you're going to do the best that you can, complete all 3, and then press play again to see if you are right. How did you do? Did your answers match mine? You could have used different variables. If you used X for all of them, I used H for hours and W for weeks, but you could have used whatever variables that you wanted. Hopefully you got the answers that match mine. If you did, great. If not, go ahead and fix your paper so that it looks like mine. This brings us to the end of this video, so if you like this video, go ahead and throw us a thumbs up. If you love this video, go ahead and throw us a sub, and we will catch you in the next one.